Bienvenidos. This is a podcast that explores Latinx media and culture in its many forms. I am Dr. Rojo Robles.
And I am Dr. Rebecca L. Salois. And we are Latinx and Latin American Studies professors at Baruch College in New York City. In this podcast, we will analyze Latinx film, television, literature, art, and cultures.
We will consider how these works are perceived, analyze them, and investigate the real-world reflections and implication of that work on Latinx cultures in the U.S. and beyond.
Welcome to Latinx Visions.
Bienvenidas, bienvenidos, bienvenides.
Welcome back, everyone.
Today, we will continue focusing on Latinx cultural politics by conversing with artist and teatrero Miguel Trelles from Teatro LATEA. But before that, we will provide some background on LATEA and Miguel himself. Then we'll jump right into the interview itself. The interview was recorded in front of a live audience at El Clemente Soto Velez Cultural and Educational Center on March 7, 2025.
This conversation was part of Speaking Volumes, a symposium on sound and listening, hosted by two of our colleagues from Baruch College, Victor Sierra Matute and Camila Torres Castro, and sponsored by LATEA and El Clemente. And we appreciate the invitation to join in the conversation and contribute with our interview of Miguel. As a disclaimer, there may be some background construction noises towards the middle and end of the recording, as El Clemente is undergoing renovations. And, hey, it plays into the whole theme of the Sound Symposium. We've tried to decrease it where possible so it doesn't become distracting, but we thank you for your patience when it appears in the episode. After the interview, Rojo and I will be back to share our reflections on the conversation with Miguel and his engagement with the students in the audience who asked him questions.
So a little bit of background. Teatro LATEA was founded in 1982 by Nelson Tamayo, Nelson Landreau, Mateo Gomez, and Marta Garcia to address Latina underrepresentation in theater. In 1993, Ed Vega and the LATEA founders play a key role in establishing the Clemente Soto Velez Cultural and Educational Center, securing a vital place for Latino arts in New York. LATEA produces and promotes experimental theater, film, music, dance, and visual arts, creating opportunities for Latin American artists while engaging Latina and multicultural audiences. Since 2017, LATEA has reinvigorated its focus on three distinctive initiatives. LATEA Stage produces and hosts Latino theater. LATEA Screen produces new media content and holds film festivals and open screens. And LATEA Music presents Latin jazz, Afro-Caribbean rhythms, and South American genres. Spoken word events and visual arts exhibits are also offered. In response to evolving media landscape, LATEA launched LATEA Remoto to stream original Latinx content online, transforming its stage into a versatile film set. This initiative enhances accessibility and visibility for Latina arts through digital platforms.
Miguel Trelles is a Puerto Rican visual artist who works in the Lower East Side of Manhattan at the Clemente Soto Velez Cultural and Educational Center, where he currently serves as co-executive director of Teatro LATEA. He's the co-founder, co-producer, and head visual arts curator of the Borimix Puerto Rico Fest. Trelles' paintings and silkscreens derive inspiration from dynastic Chinese painting and pre-Columbian and Latin American imagery. They honor the Puerto Rican silkscreen tradition of the mid to late 20th century. His work has also been exhibited worldwide, including in Miami, Rio de Janeiro, Lima, San Juan, Santo Domingo, Havana, Tegucigalpa, Buenos Aires, Paris, and Chengdu. His paintings are also part of permanent collections at the Frost Art Museum in Miami, the Fundación Gavarrón in Valladolid, El Museo de Arte de Ponce, the Institute of Puerto Rican Culture in San Juan, and El Museo del Barrio here in New York. Professor Trelles is an adjunct professor at Baruch College in both the Department of Black and Latino Studies and the Department of Modern Languages and Comparative Literatures. He's also taught at City Tech, Hunter College, Brown University, Fairleigh Dickinson University, and several cities throughout China. All right, Miguel. So to get us started, we were hoping maybe you could talk to us a little bit about LATEA's mission and the importance of exposure to Latinx arts.
Well, I think Rojo summarized a little bit of LATEA's mission. I think it's important to also highlight the reciprocity. We want to give a forum to Latinos, and but we also want other people to share in that forum, so that because Latinos and all of us are not just artists wanting to share, but we're also avid consumers of culture, avid listeners, avid readers, avid. So I think LATEA is like a nice meeting point, a crossroads from a Latino standpoint, but welcoming a lot of manifestations and a lot of the downtown, a lot of artists downtown, a lot of the downtown aesthetic. Yeah. So what was the other part of the question?
The mission was the first part, and the importance of exposure just in general to Latinx arts.
Yeah, I mean, every artist produces, I think, out of a sense of quiet desperation of trying to bring out something from their own, their own experience, their own. But once that need is fulfilled, because you painted the picture, you wrote the poem, you taped the composition when you were rapping or whatever, then there is this second part of our need, and that is the part to communicate, to share. And it's oftentimes that part that becomes very problematic. I mean, because there are no venues, or the venues are limited, or gatekeeping, a host of things sometimes prevents creators from sharing. And I think LATEA is important in that sense, because it's a third space. You have your work, you have your home, and your work might be in the arts or otherwise. But LATEA then becomes this third space where you can share your art, and other people can participate in it to the extent that you want them to. So yeah. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, I love that idea of the third space there. People of different Latin American and Caribbean ancestry founded the theater, as Rojo was mentioning. How do you keep their legacy alive? Do you conceive LATEA as an epicenter for Latin American debates?
Absolutely. I mean, I keep their legacy alive because every time I get on this stage to present stuff, I tell people we're standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, because they took this building when it was a liability, because they had to fight. The neighborhood was falling apart, and it was more violent, and this and that, and they sort of fought to have this space for artists within that context. And so I think they're with us. But of course, it's not that past, it's the future at this point that we are concerned about. Who are the artists that are going to come through? What are they going to share? How are we going to make sure that it's an integrated part of the New York cultural offering, integrated to all the great things that are happening in this city and in other cities across Latin America and the world? So that's very important. And, the founders were talking about Nelson Tamayo, who I did not have the privilege of meeting, was from Ecuador. So Ecuador has a strong DNA in LATEA. Nelson Landrieu was from Uruguay. So we also have, South America, like way south. And then Mateo Gomez is from the Dominican Republic. He's the one surviving founder, and he's with us. And, perhaps some people might take issue, but I feel very strongly as a Puerto Rican that the flavor of Latinaje today is very Dominican, at least in our city, in New York. And then joined by Marta Garcia, who's from Puerto Rico, the wife of the Uruguayan guy. And then when Ed Vega, a Puerto Rican novelist, came in, they were not just influential in the Clemente Soto Velez, they created the Clemente Soto Velez out of that office. As artists and as people looking for roles for Latinos in contemporary theater and film, they wanted to preserve their artistry and not get into the management of the building. So they spun off the building in an act of total generosity, made sure that this building keeps running parallel to, and, with other missions besides the one that we have here, theatrical, of course. And so, I like to joke that if the Clemente is Mexico, LATEA is Teotihuacan. This is the place.
Let's talk about LATEA in the context of the Lower East Side, in the context of Loisaida. During a recent studio visit with my students last semester, you told us about the multicultural history, her story, their story of Loisaida, Lower East Side, and also about LATEA within that history, yeah, and within this particular community we're in. How do you keep foregrounding these often silent histories in your curation of events and exhibitions?
Well, fortunately, we have a great relationship with perhaps the epicenter of Latino culture, starting as a Puerto Rican manifestation that grew and became very international, which is the Nuyorican poetry movement. And as we all know, the Nuyorican poetry movement has its site, a few blocks away in the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. For example, we every now and then, La Bruja, who's now the director of the cafe and a remarkable poet in her own right, she comes here, and recites poetry. Other than that, we are connected to people like Epifanio Torres over at the Loisaida Festival. So there is a tissue, there is a connecting tissue between the Nuyorican poets, the Loisaida Festival, and most importantly, the people. We have some merchants. Obviously, this area is in perpetual flux. Different people come at different times ever since it was some kind of Jewish ghetto, 100, 125 years ago. And it keeps evolving. So we are also very keen about Miguel from El Castillo de Jagua, the restaurant. A lot of our Dominican merchants are friends and come see dance and such, the barber, Socrates. Try to keep it both cultural and also have a real presence of that mythical community that everybody's looking for, but that, it takes a lot to maintain because people are very busy. Everybody's very pressed. And the extra time that you have for culture, sometimes we're just too wiped out. You sit in front of the TV and take whatever you can get from there. So yeah. So we're trying. We are Loisaida institution. Ed Vega, the founder of the Clemente, who was the chair of the LATEA board back in 92, 93. He is a novelist that has been incorporated into the Nuyorican movement. He was not a poet, but he was a novelist in English. Published novelist, and so on and so forth. So I think and Miguel Algarin used to hang out here every so often as a personal friend. Tato Laviera was always very generous with his time and effort. Pedro Pietri. So we've been blessed with also that nod, by the folks that are galactic, at least in our pantheon of literary figures of the Puerto Rican, Caribbean, and Latin American diaspora. So it's fluid. They come, they go, and now there's new voices, and we hope to have, and we have been having those new voices.
Can we expand a little bit on the Nuyorican influence and impact in a specific regarding the emphasis on orality from that movement, the emphasis on performance, how LATEA has been also a platform to develop those aesthetics of orality, of performance, of listening. Because today, actually, like the event, the big event today is about exploring sound, And I think like the Nuyorican movement was exploring sound and performance, How LATEA and how this network, this tejido that you were mentioning, has also been embedded within that tradition of orality.
Well, the tradition of orality comes from a necessity. I mean, we come from societies that have not had the opportunity or that the desire to educate people at some times, in some points, and a lot of us coming to, let's say, to different diasporas, whether people go to Europe or whether people come to here to the United States, and most particularly us Puerto Ricans, we come from an oral tradition. People telling stories. Maybe people don't have so many books or access to books or learning at home. So the tradition is very oral, and that goes all the way back to Spain and the romance and the poems that you learn as a child. So I think, that tradition found a very fertile ground here in the Lower East Side, thanks to these poets. And the founders of LATEA, the first thing they did, that used to be, we have a bar here as you go in, that used to be the actual stage. That was the stage because this was a school back in the 60s. And so this is more formal. So the first thing they do is we're in the early 80s, they transformed the space. So now this ample stage, I'm sorry, we're all kind of cold. I asked downstairs if they could turn the heat on, but for those listening, put on your sweaters and your jackets. We're all, bundled up in here. So they transform it so that it's very open, more experimental to do justice to our name. And then it's because of this openness to, which is, there is theatricality, yes, yeah, but there's also an informality that goes to that performance aspect of the word, where you're not going to have so many costumes, where you're not going to have like the curtain opening and out, but just a solitary figure or a couple of figures talking, shouting, and I feel that the whole setup of LATEA has a little bit to do with the weight of that tradition of orality, thanks to the Nuyorican movement and the impact, because the Nuyorican movement created the slam, the whole modality of the slam, the sound, just the voice, and that's all over in Japan, that's all over the world, thanks to these folks just privileging sound, privileging our voices, privileging that that texture, those textures.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have a nice, fun little disclaimer at the beginning of the episode about the construction noises, but El Clemente is modernizing. They're getting an elevator to be ADA compliant, correct? So, correct. We'll take the noises in the background for this episode. All right. So LATEA and the Clemente celebrate the annual series of events MLK, and Borimix. Can you tell us about these traditions and the importance of fostering programming for Black and Puerto Rican communities?
I'm very proud of Borimix. Many years ago, a fellow resident and the director of the premier children's bilingual puppet theater here in New York and perhaps in the States, a fellow called Manuel Moran, also from Puerto Rico. I didn't have a theater. I was just working out of my studio. I'm a visual arts painter. So he comes to me and says, hey, man, we got to do something. Why don't we, because he's in a theater at that point, he has that more institutional sort of awareness. I'm like, great, yeah, I would like to do posters, silk screens posters and something. And we created something that initially for the first, 8 years or something, was looking to reinforce or broadcast diasporic Nuyorican Puerto Rican culture, right? So we do that. And soon enough, the interest of growing with our city, with our diasporas, led us to really live up to the name Borimix, which I coined when we started thinking about, like, I don't know, una botella de adobo, those adobo bottles or something like that. And we started going with partnering with different countries in Latin America. So we would have some Puerto Rican artists from here and from the island, as well as, let's say, a year it was Dominicans, Cubans, Mexicans, Ecuadorians, and so on and so forth. So that it's really, it's a great love song from Puerto Rico, Loisaida, to our continents and our islands. So yeah, that's Borimix, and still going on. Let's see with the construction how it pans out this year, but we were able to do it this last year. And then MLK is something that is a little less time. It's maybe in its 8th edition. We just finished the 8th edition of MLK, and it responds to the need within the Latin American community, also and the Caribbean community, to acknowledge that even if we criticize the racism in North American society, we come from very racist societies, and that's an elephant in the china closet or not. And in the cultural field, it's also you can see that there is not enough participation of our Afro-descendant brothers and sisters. So I partnered with there was a public school librarian, retired public school librarian, who once walked in through those doors many years ago. And he ended up in my studio, and he said he had his son, and he wanted to prep his son from high school to college, wanted to do a portfolio. So we struck up a friendship, and we developed that in tandem. We created, Trayvon Martin had just been murdered, and everyone was really upset. So we wanted to create something. So we appealed to the figure. We could have called it X, because certainly Malcolm X was foremost in our minds, but we decided to go the way of invoking Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King and to create an event, a week-long, a series of events that it's not about, we're going to do the figure of the Reverend, the picture of the Reverend. Or we invoke the Reverend. We talk about his birth, his life, his assassination, all that stuff. But the whole week would be just, here's a stage, here are the walls. You're seeing the show from this year on the walls, and let's just make sure that the Afro Latin thing is at the forefront, together with African American from the country, and also as we grow, we're also getting into the African from the continent. So all these things are making this Afro Latin thing grow, evolve. I lost my partner, my friend, Roger passed away by the second or third edition. His wife and his son, still contribute. And again, we find curators, we partner, and we're just trying to keep that thing going forward.
This season, the theme of our podcast is Latinx Cultural Politics. Yeah. What is the role of the theater of LATEA, of the Clemente, in examining how power, identity, and social struggles are negotiated through cultural expressions?
Well, just having the theater and trying to keep this alive is a political thing, because funding for all the arts also suffers from the same exclusions, and some people get and some people don't. We're very happy for what we get. We just think the percent of the population that we're trying to entertain, just to be very vanilla about it, is significant, and we could do more. So that's always implicit. Then every artist has a political vision, or may have. They can forefront it or not. We're not, it's not agitprop. Everybody handles their politics differently. But the politics of the house is to make sure that they have a voice. They can talk, and whether it's voices that have been traditionally suppressed or not considered or underrepresented, we want them to be here. In terms of proselytizing or active campaigning, I'll be very honest. I mean, this work here consumes us, and so it's not as actively writing letters or canvassing the Congress, but we just hope to inspire so that we can participate in a secondary role in that kind of advocacy. I know the Clemente right now is a bit more active in that, or at least dealing with the Latinx project and seeing statistics and numbers and seeing how they pan out. But here we like to go hardcore culture, art presentation, and have those political things start sort of. That's where we talk the politics, like after the show, we sit down, we have some wine, we like-minded people argue with people that might not see the same way, but to sort of keep it cafe, like the original cafe style culture, and have the politics sort of, take on the life that they can or will.
And again, going back to that third space in a place that is not your home and not your work.
Yes, that's very important.
Let's talk about one of those elephants in the room in terms of the life in Loisaida. Let's talk about gentrification. Yeah, this is an evident issue of the community, affecting pretty much everybody around us. How this issue that is affecting the longtime residents of Loisaida, of the Lower East Side, gentrification, displacement, how is LATEA addressing and searching for solutions to this problem?
Well, I mean, I don't know that we're searching for solutions to these problems. We are offering visions of the problem and people that might have, specific solutions. What we are offering is an open space for what's left of this community to come in and feel at home, right? So that's very important, and it's very important at a host of levels. Because culture can be very expensive. It's refinement. It's something that is also managed to be a very exclusive. So we keep it open, and we're treasuring what this community, because community is disappearing. I mean, but that being said, the process of gentrification here, as in and countries, even whole countries are getting gentrified. It's a flux. It's perpetual motion. I don't think we or anyone will be able to stop it. How do we negotiate? How do we also make it so that people want to stay? Because gentrification, a lot of times, it's like, hey, I'll give you $100,000 to move out tomorrow. And a lot of us take the 100 grand or the 50 grand or the 20 grand. So it can't be said to be forced out, at least in those instances. Like, oh, they forced. No, I took the money. I left. And then, and that might work in different lifestyles for different people at different circumstances. That might have been a great boon. But you also have a lot of people that take that and then to go where? To do what? To lose meeting with the grocer, to lose going to your beauty salon, to lose that sort of everybody knows each other thing. And then there's a sadness. Then, but then it's a very personal decision. And like I said, on the social front, it's not like we are in a position of doing something. I happen to have the privilege of being here, but when I think about myself, a guy from Puerto Rico that came here, like it's late 80s, early 90s, I'm part of the gentrification. I'm an artist, so we're all part of that perpetual motion, and a lot of gentrification too has to do with our diasporic communities, and this goes all the way back to the Jewish ghetto. You grew up in the Lower East Side, can't wait to get out. We're racing you, we're doing an effort so you can move on to the next thing. Except now this has become a little bit of the next thing. The moment we move out, it becomes more deluxe, it becomes more elegant, and then we can't access it back in. What I would like is for people, Latinos, Puerto Ricans, to be able to opt back in if they so desire, because that's the hardship of gentrification. Black folk, Latino folk, even Asian folk at this point sometimes, are being moving out and not coming. If you look at Little Italy, which we're not gonna, put in the POC category, but Little Italy has also almost disappeared. So it's not just us; it's like the city in its motion, and the really inexcusable thing for me as a city dweller and as a Loisaida resident is when it's just keep an apartment closed. Whether you've been here and you're part of the original, but you have that apartment closed because you really don't live here, or it's just for money, or just like we are be the crap out of our spaces, but then that's not real community. Mm-hmm. That's just for money, and some of us are complicit in that, and that's where I feel the social tissue that kind of can enable to change, can enable us to create a vibrant neighborhood of inclusion and cultural participation and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the gentrification element, you're right. This is the city that's always changing and always evolving, but it's about the loss of culture and inaccessibility of that culture and those experiences that really make gentrification as nefarious as it is. Just to switch gears a little bit, we want to try and connect a little bit to the theme of this symposium today, which is sound, and you do work with the theater. So, theater is a medium that engages all of the senses, right? You've got your smell, sight, touch, sound, maybe taste, depending. So, since today we are participating in this symposium on sound and listening, can you speak to the role of that sense, sound, in theater and performance for both the performers and the audience?
It is huge. I mean, sound, the one thing I have to say is, like, I've heard from musicians, folks that play in Carnegie Hall and different, that the acoustics here are decent. Not stellar, but fairly decent. And we have a lot of concerts. And also when people get out on stage and talk, you can hear. So we are lucky to have, because some places the acoustics are terrible. And that really puts a crimp on the style. So I'm very happy about that. And the fact that we privilege music in this house, perhaps because that's politics. The privileging music is politics, because as Latin Americans, especially Caribbean folks, we've been conditioned, oh, you got writers there, or all this is from a level of ignorance or this and that. But when we say music, everybody shut up, right? People know that, those sounds that came from Africa, mixed up with the shells, mixed up with our mestizaje, nobody can, we have a world-class musical institution in all the Antilles, in the Caribbean. So then music posits the challenge of Also amplification. I don't know if you've been hearing the crackle pop, the Rice Krispies on the mic. It's always so frustrating. But we make do. We buy equipment. We check the speakers. And it's always it's an ever evolving emergency, update stuff, make sure the sound, because sound in theater, the way we've been dealing with it over the past few years, is a recourse. It's an enormous recourse. Yes, visuality is very important and the light and stuff. But if a sound is very heavy, whether it's coming from the left, from the right, our balance is affected. So, and some of those things are hard to do with tech. So that's that. On the more elemental sound, meaning our throats making the sound, the singers, the actor speaking, and that kind of stuff, it's hard because when the artists come, you first of all, we have nothing but respect. And I have found also that diction has been a little bit sacrificed. It is funny in some place and stuff. Well, you don't want the diction to make it so that you sound too affected, but there is a need to transmit, especially if there's no amplification, to make sure those sounds are there. And diction or classes about diction and stuff, or the fact that we don't have the opportunity, let's say in some crowds, to have that training, sometimes compromises some theatrical spectacles, especially then if you're singing without amplification and you don't have some kind of training or a vocal apparatus that's really remarkable, and there are some out there that's just out of this world. It's also very hard for the sound. So there's the training of the sound makers, of us as humans and our box, and then there is the tech aspect, and they're both super important.
Oh yeah, as podcasters, we get that.
Yeah.
That's everything that we do.
But one thing, when we have made the investments on the modest way, we have a board there that we can tape. And one of the dreams here is, because we have music, is that we always tape with the artist's respect. We can tape the spectacles so that when we play music here, which we love playing, salsa, Afro-Cuban music, Afro-Peruvian, you name it, but that we would only play the music taped at LATEA, live at LATEA being the things that we pipe. So we're working towards that, but I feel that goes back to that placemaking, to the fact that we're in the Lower East Side, the fact that all these acts are playing here, and the fact that the experience, even when you're not in the experience you paid to come see, or that you were invited to, that the experience, informal experience, is already something memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's grounded on the activities, on the cultural activities that's been happening. So in the tradition of the space.
Yeah,
fantastic.
So when people think about the theater in general, I think it's pretty common for people to think about like the big musical productions on Broadway, especially living here in New York. But those shows can be expensive and inaccessible to the average person to just attend. How do you see smaller, more local theaters playing a role in accessibility to the theater for audiences? And how do you make them aware of what you're doing here and to show up for these performances?
Well, I think that the small off-Broadway circuit in New York has always been like a huge thing. It's like, it's like stepping stone. You don't get to heroin until you smoke pot, right? So here we are, the marijuana of the theater circuit. So that's very important. Unfortunately, and this doesn't have to do with this being a Latino theater and stuff, the whole off-Broadway, the whole biodiversity of the cultural environment, I think it's suffering, because like we're suffering with the stores, diversity, you got big box people, so perhaps bigger theaters are going to get more of a draw, and the little theaters, because of the real estate pressures, the gentrification and such, are disappearing. It is funny, I hear as the director of this theater, it's a little nerve-wracking to see people come out, no, we lost that theater, so we want to do the production with you, or want to rent the theater for our production. So that's constantly, on the back of our head saying, are we next, or will we be next? And that's very, very scary, because a city like New York has always had more options than perhaps many cities, and that's going. And what was this? What else was part of the thing?
How do you make audiences aware of what you're doing here and to have them show up?
That's the big tragedy, man. That's so hard because we're always it's 15 acres and a mule, and we're all, the mule is sometimes off to pasture, and we have people, and then we run out of money, and then we're all artists, so it's hard to be. And right now we're in a very difficult moment with this construction, so we have a lot of volunteerism. We're very grateful to a lot of people that are sort of keeping LATEA alive. But the marketing aspect has been something I immensely need to work on, and I just don't know. I need help with that. We have some Instagram. We have an amazing webmaster that puts amazing visuals out. But I think one of the things could be beyond our control, and I feel that for all the podcasts and also some blogs and stuff, I feel very upset that in New York City, a Latin capital of the world, a Latino, Latine, Latinx, whatever, capital of the world, that we don't have a go-to journal because of the decentralization. The newspaper, El Diario, has always been very generous with us. I'm really, happy with El Diario, but there's less and less sort of like a press organ, a critique, reviews, something that will make the buzz. But then again, if there were such a review, such an instrument via the digital newspaper or such, I don't know if people would go to it because everybody has different, we've become very sectarian and very divided.
Algorithmic.
Yeah, so I feel that we're missing criticality, like positive, and not positive. You can trash a show. Nothing like somebody trashing a show for everybody to want to go see it, right? Like it sucks and everybody shows up. If it's great, everybody shows up. If they say, nobody shows up. But getting people and the marketing part, we are right now in part of something called Teatro Fest. Teatro Fest is where the Latin theaters with a venue, not a company, but that have a bricks and mortar operation to run, have come together, and we pool our resources. We have a little campaign ad. The city has helped a little bit. So that goes a long way for a small theater like us. I think we're like the Cinderella of the Latino theaters to get the word across. A little subway platform ad, we can dream with something like that, like an ad in other venues. So this is one of the ways, by coming together, economies of scale with the Latino theater groups, Repertorio Español, folks like Intar, folks like, and hopefully one day the New Yorkers not part of that, but maybe after the renovation, that would be really cool. That's how we get a little bit the word out. Mm-hmm. But that's a huge challenge.
I mean, we're talking about the need for marketing, and we do all teach at Baruch, where there's a lot of students who study marketing. So
hey, you're all welcome, please. I mean, we run on Baruch has been a great force of good during my tenure here because we've had interns, also because of the remarkable preparation. A lot of people going towards accounting in Baruch Ed. We've had remarkable accounting interns and also some marketing interns. It's just that sometimes the ferociousness of marketing at the student level, I find a lot of competency at the undergraduate level in handling the Instagram and stuff, but there's a lot more to it, like the mechanics. When do you post this and that? It's like, it just seems endless. It never stops. What you have to mind, when you have to throw the stuff, when do you react to somebody, when do you add somebody to your thing, and all things have consequences in that rarefied world of the numbers, of more followers and this and that. And we're busy putting shows, and so sometimes we miss out.
Vamos a hablar de pintura. Let's talk about painting. You're a painter. You're a visual artist with a long career, developing very important work. You just opened a show in Connecticut. Tell us about this show that just opened yesterday. Yeah, tell us a little bit about it. And since we're thinking about the arts in an interdisciplinary way, tell us also to what extent sound, music, and even the work you do in the theater participates or is integrated in this new work that you just opened.
The show in Connecticut is called Mesoamerican Pop. And we had a very nice opening thanks to the Gateway Community College, which is in downtown New Haven. It was wonderful for me because I have had the luxury of great rapport with my students, whether they be at Hunter, whether they be at City Tech, and especially at Baruch for the longstanding association. But it's great because it was a different school, so I was not a teacher, and the folks came. The student, we had 2 openings, one at 12 to 2. So the student body that, commutes and leaves later on could make it. And we were packed, and I had moments to talk with these graphic design students. And I thought because the Mesoamerican pop show is a mixture of my wide-ranging interest in the visuality of the pre-Columbian inhabitants, most notably the Mayas in this America, mixed with comics, a love of comic books and sequential art. So I think it had a graphic pop thing that attracted people, and then they got onto the Maya sort of admiration and study that I conduct. So that's very rewarding. And at night, I was very proud to see a cross-section of New Haven society, because New Haven's a very vibrant town, or a town with a lot of universities, but also a lot of people kind of hard up and straight. So I had a nice cross-section of folks, both the students, the professors, and the academics, and just regular folk, coming in, because the place has a visuality to Church, to Church Street and some of the principal streets. So that was really intense, and the show's very black and white, and it's again, mixing this fascination. Like I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm Caribbean. I got university studies. I got trained. So we inherited our visuality from Europe. I mean, that is the sort of connector, whether you rebel against it or whether looking for alternate things. And it's been a fascination after my study of Chinese art as an alternate, right? As something very distant from the Western canon, to realize, but then there is the pre-Columbian American canon. There is such a thing. There is this ways of rendering both people, space, objects, and I've been trying to teach myself or to unteach myself something. Not that I will ever. I mean, I love the Renaissance. I love rendering. I love, how to draw and to paint. But to teach like the old Mexican paintings, to paint, to be able to start getting into how they were looking at the world has been a great thing that I've kind of engaged with in a very clumsy way or whatever. But so that was special. And I feel the comic books, as with Chinese art, comic books have, or sequential art, if we want to be elegant about it, has had a connectivity to non-Western art for a long, long time. It derives from the graphics in some of the most original Chinese ink paintings. And I wonder if in the 50s, when you had some amazing sequential art being produced in this country, and when some of the great Maya cities were getting rediscovered, some of these comic book artists, and I'm thinking most notably like Mad Magazine, some of the very weird drawings in some of the Mad magazines from the 50s on, were not or even someone as well known as Jack Kirby, the creator of the Marvel Universe. They were looking at the tomb of Pacal, which was getting discovered, right, in Guatemala, and looking at some of those visuals and incorporating some into characters like Galactus or something. So I decided to bring them together in my own way. And so it was a great opening. It's a fun show. And I don't know sound in my work. I'm a purist in the sense that I draw, I paint. So the sound is what I'm playing. There's a soundtrack in my head always. It's typically Cuban, circa 50 to 70, with a lot of salsa from New York in the 70s, and Andean music for rest. When you need the spheres, the music of the spheres, you go to the Andes and you disconnected from words and just hear the El Condor or something like that.
When you're painting, do you play music?
Yeah, I mean, not all the time. I sometimes painting is about silence, and the music is the strokes. The rhythm is in the strokes. But no, I'm a big fan of music. So music is always a pleasurable thing. I always think that Da Vinci, in those animosities and competitions among artists, Da Vinci would poke fun at Michelangelo. I took on to, with your chisel and making noise and the dust and all that stuff with the marbles. I'm painting. I have a little, some girls playing the harp. And and there's like Gioconda sitting there, and I can listen to music. Can't listen to music without construction stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We have one last question before we'll open it up to the audience. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us about LATEA, about theater in general, or more specifically your own work and the art that you create? And maybe if you said there is a social media presence for LATEA where people can follow LATEA to find out about the events.
Yeah, Instagram LATEA, Teatro LATEA.
Instagram Teatro LATEA.
Teatro LATEA. No, I would just like to invite each and all of you to come hang out, to check out. It's hard for us to reach out as effectively as we ought to or as we will at some point. But check out the website, see if there's shows going on. Come, bring people. The greatest thing you can do for this theater is show up, pay the ticket, invite a few friends, and then beyond that, as folks that are in the make, as our students and people looking out to go into the professional world, just know that we have a real good intersection here of language, because Spanish is spoken here. So if you're a student of language, that's a great thing. It's not just spoken here in the office and in our daily interactions, but it's also presented on stage, regularly. So that's one thing. The other thing is there are a number of real skills like the Instagram stuff, writing letters, communicating, stuff that seems very easy, but once you land on it, it can be challenging, or there are little tricks, so that's also an opportunity in an environment that I like to stress, because I'm an artist, and that is very open. As long as we respect each other, we want to curse, we want to shout, we don't want to lose anything of emotiveness and openness and just agreeing to be different in under this roof. So feel free to drop by, show up, hang out. That's the only thing I can think of.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then, is there another microphone for questions, or should I? Okay, so we have a microphone for questions in the back.
Hi, my name is Imani. I just wanted to first of all say it was really nice meeting you, and I loved hearing you speak about how different cultures and different Latin American countries contribute to one big culture, I guess you can say. And I just wanted to know how your experience was kind of educating yourself and appreciating other cultures, because like you said, you're from Puerto Rico. I have family from Puerto Rico too, from Luisa and Aguadilla. And I think it's very important to appreciate and acknowledge that, like you were saying before, our culture comes from different cultures as well. So it's important to acknowledge them. And like you said, the elephant in the room, how people just don't acknowledge the African American side of being like, I'm Afro-Latina. And so I just like to experience it more and get to know it. So any like positive or negative experiences that you had getting to know like different cultures as well as yours?
Well, I happened to, my father was Cuban. So from my household, I'm from a mix. We grew up in Puerto Rico, Puerto Ricans, but dad was Cuban. So that immediately creates like a relativity. And I think that relativity has impacted my sisters, my brother, and I profoundly, because there was another way, very close in many ways, but everybody calls the shots. I married Dominican. My wife is Dominican, so I've also had the ride of my life in terms of, I missed the 70s here. I was a baby or very young in Puerto Rico. And so, I missed that moment when we were all at Yankee Stadium, when salsa ruled, when the Puerto Rican ethos really transformed a Latin American perspective, because it really transformed everybody, because it was coming from New York and it affected so many, went all the way to Spain and this and that. So, but I've been lucky that I've seen bachata, I've seen Romeo Santos. I've seen that explosion, the palace over there in the Heights. In my particular experience, And that coupled with the fact that two sisters of my grandma back in the 40s married an Argentinian guy. So we have these cousins in Argentina. So this talk in the family table about the different cultures, about Peru and going to Lima, for example, as a thing that I was able to finally get to, about hearing about San Jose de Costa Rica after some earthquake or something that happened, about listening to all the nations in our America has been fundamental, because often, not just Puerto Rico can be very international because we've had access to the United States for a number of reasons that we're not going to go into here. So it's given us this rub, particularly when we come in and out of, whether you Miami or you come here or you're in Chicago, Detroit, wherever. But there is this sense in our American culture where everybody sticks to their thing. Oh, we're in a Dominican household, so Dominican is great. Cuban household, we rule. The Mexico, and sometimes we fail to connect with each other or to acknowledge the greatness of the neighbors. We don't have to be in competition all the time. That's why my Bori Mix, or our Bori Mix, is something that I feel strongly about, because if we celebrate together, then things break down and people are going to, we like your singers a lot. Actually, I grew up with more of your singers than my singers, and that fosters a sisterhood, a brotherhood that's very important. So, and I just think it's Latin America, the whole kit and caboodle right here. I think it's huge.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I would like to ask Miguel if you can give us a sneak peek of what is next at LATEA. I know you want to show some soccer here.
Yes. We have an amazing program coming up. You have to check the websites for specific. Yesterday, I welcomed a fifth grandchild, my wife in New Haven at 5 a.m. So more important than the show was that baby girl. So I'm a little, frazzled, but a couple of things that I can think about. We have, as part of this Latino Teatro Fest, a couple of really intense things. We have flamenco, which we've always done well with flamenco. People love flamenco because even, it is about the diversity that is Spain. And, it's an air of something else that sort of weaves into the fabric of European culture, transforms it, and in terms of Spain, makes it unique. So we have a flamenco concert coming up, and that's a one-off. And then in terms of the actual theatrical productions, we've had great luck. There are certain groups of Latinos in New York that have more people than other people. One of those groups are the Colombians, and Colombians come from a great cultural tradition over there in the homeland, and we have a lot of Colombians doing theater and initiatives and stuff. So we have an improv, which is fun, which is up, which is very diverse. So I'm always excited when they come in. Sometimes I love it, other times but it's always fresh. You never know what the hell's gonna happen on stage. Sometimes they throw food all over the place, and then we got to clean it up. But anyway, it can be very exciting. And then so we have that improv. We also have this Andean sort of thing called Abya Ayala, and Abya Ayala they're going to personify diverse Latin American women and do a show with small interventions with these actors. The group is Peruvian, of Peruvian sort of origin, Abya Ayala. So that promises a lot. We've met a couple of times with Patricia Aranibar, and I'm very, very curious about what's going to pan out with that. And then we also have this. She's also Colombian, coincidentally. She's doing a one-woman show. This performance. So Me Estoy Quedando Calva. We have two nights with Patricia doing her one-woman show. So that's all, super exciting. And thanks to the Clemente, the folks, the Matrix, the big folks, we're going to preview, and I don't know if I'll have tickets or if it's going to be a more private event, about a Chilean visual artist, a guy called Gordon Mata Clark, very influential. And they're doing an opera on Mata Clark. I think Carnegie Hall is involved. I think we might be previewing, or I don't know if we'll meet the creators or give a taste. So in a nutshell, those are the things. Gracias, Victor, for asking. Those are some of the things you can look forward to during this Latino Teatro Fest, which is going to be March and April. Those are the things. And then they're doing electrical work. So we'll be closed for 10 days while they do the electrical work. Let's hope everything comes out fine after that.
Hi, my name is Angie. Oh my God, this is so weird hearing myself. But
Some
thank you.
reverb on Angie. Really, put some reverb on.
This kind of goes back to like the including other cultures question.
Mhm.
I know that Latin America is a huge region, which is why it's no surprise that so many different languages are spoken. And obviously, Spanish is one of the primary languages shared amongst the region. So I was wondering how you guys here at Teatro LATEA include other Latin American countries and cultures that are not Spanish speaking.
Love your question, and thank you, because it's very important to me. We have been blessed, when you talk about Latin America, whether we like it or not, yeah, very much Spanish speaking, there is that universe called Brazil. And Brazil, owns all of us, just like Mexico. There are a few countries that are just so all encompassing, but of course, Mexico, the official language is Spanish. It's another conversation. But Brazil, encompasses all of us, and Brazil has been in and out of the house because, again, the Brazilian music is something that you cannot walk away from. So we have a big Brazilian presence on the music thing. But more pointedly to what you're saying, a theater typically, and a lot of our Latino theaters, you have a house company. A theater company that then they do the repertory, and I was kind of looking at this, and I have people, and some people are asking, and we're not at the level where I can fund that, but still there was the thing, and I went with a dance company with a choreographer from Martinique, Carol Alexis has become the house company, the Ballet des Amériques, because I figured if I go Spanish. There are so many of us here that don't know Spanish, that are feel strongly Latin American, strongly Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, you name it, Mexican, and then they don't speak Spanish and feel disenfranchised a little by Spanish or scared and stuff. We want to enfranchise them. We want them. We need them. But, there is that feeling. There is that frustration. And then it's like, well, then they're going to be out. If I put English, a Latino company in English, then all our folks, on the Spanish, crowds like, you betrayed us. How could you do that? Like
Oh my goodness.
El Español, and then the old heads and stuff. So I was facing a dilemma, huge dilemma. And then I thought, a Francophone dance company, just the bodies, the beautiful choreography, something visual. And then, to your point, we're gaining ground since we're all categorized as Latinos, and French is Latino. And France has had a great presence in or a notable presence in the Caribbean and in our America, not to mention the presence in Africa, that this was gaining ground, so that we are also not reductive in the Spanish sense of the word, but growing with our Latin American neighbors and Caribbean nations that don't speak Spanish, that were, taken over by other European folks. So, yeah.
The recent MLK also were you were showcasing many thinkers from the Francophone Caribbean. There was a program on Aimé Césaire,
Yes.
Surrealismo Francés, right, del Caribe.
Yeah.
So we see also how you're trying to put different cultures together in that programming.
I think it's great for us Spanish speakers, Latino, to have that broadness that you were talking about, to appeal to the Portuguese speakers from Brazil and from Portugal, of course, to appeal to the French, to our French brothers and sisters from, Martinica, Guadalupe, Haiti, and have them be part of this discourse, because it's really, we're all the same in the Caribbean. It's just different colonial legacies leave different languages. So yeah, that's a big consideration.
My name is Michelle. I have a question based for more like the younger crowd that grew up here in New York, that some may feel like they didn't get to grow up with such a big, heavy base of Spanish in their home. Where do you think that crowd fits in LATEA? And how do you feel about using Spanglish instead in the theater instead of full-on Spanish and full-on English?
You do it all the time. I think it's a huge consideration for me particularly, because I feel like in terms of sometimes the more Spanish purist, there was a porous frontier for Spanish at one time. You have Spanish, you have Arab, you have Hebrew, you have this mix of stuff that eventually lead to a more, homogeneous Spanish. And I feel New York can be a little bit of that frontier between Spanish, English, and other things, because there's so many other things. And in terms of the Spanglish, to me, is the future, because I hate to see children of Latinos disenfranchised because of that language frustration, because I don't know Spanish. It's like that I'm not cool, or like they're judging me, or I go back to the home country and I can't do more than 3 sentences. So I think that belonging in this space and having our Latino culture will keep evolving. Language is a huge part of it. We can't deny that, but it keeps evolving. And there's a lot of Spanglish, and how do you use it? How do we make peace with it? And you're talking to a Puerto Rican, so we have been the original in the island of Puerto Rico when folks started arriving from New York, and that original, like, no, you're not Puerto Rican because you can't speak Spanish. So we have that initial hurt, that wound, and luckily we're closing it. And things like Maria happened, who helped us enormously. Folks from the diaspora that might not be speaking the Spanish that we were trained to revere as this sanctity. So I think, no, Spanglish is spoken here. It's been spoken here for a long time.
It's a third space for language as well.
Yeah, Spanglish is a third space.
Thank you, Miguel, for being in conversation with us.
Gracias, Miguel.
All right.
So that was the conversation with Miguel. Yeah, we were really happy to be with him at LATEA, at his home ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Rebecca, what you thought about it?
Well, so listen, I know the symposium was on sound, and it's an essential element not only of our conversation, but of recording a podcast episode in the space as well, right? But I want to focus on what Miguel talked about when he addressed our questions about LATEA as a space in which communities are formed. In particular, the idea of this third space for community. I really appreciated that he addressed our need for community and how we have home, we have work, but it's really in a separate and third space where we can truly develop our sense of community separate from family and work obligations. Everyone is looking for community. And in the 21st century, or, maybe at least post-COVID, it seems more complex and challenging to establish this community. The idea of community is almost mythical to some degree. I think that's the word he used, too, in the interview. But Miguel talking about El Clemente and LATEA as spaces where that community can be built really resonated with me. We as a society seem quite isolated from one another, and having these designated spaces where we can come together seems like an essential first step in breaking through that isolation. And, for Latinx communities to have these spaces seems like a highly crucial idea at this point in time as well.
Yes, indeed. His notion of LATEA as a third space was compelling. With his awareness of the complexity of the Lower East Side, or Loisaida, as a multicultural space with a long history, Miguel's foregrounds, relations, and multiplicity. I really like that. I have always been inspired by how Borimix, for example, has become a space to preserve and display Puerto Rican culture, for sure, but always in connection and in dialogue to Latin America and the Caribbean. Similarly, the more recent MLK, the homage to Martin Luther King Jr., becomes a site to think about Black liberation and activism from an international point of view. Last semester, when I brought my students for a studio visit, they learned about Miguel's artistic practice, for sure, but also about the New Rican movement, about capoeira arts, installation methods, the importance of accessible studios for low-income artists, and even the very physical difficulties of restoring and protecting a building like El Clemente. Miguel always brings all those perspectives into the mix, and I'm happy that we were able to discuss some of those points of view with him.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up because, I brought my students to this recording, and last week in class, I was asking them about their reactions to the event and what they thought. And there was definitely some commentary on the space, right? Some people really liked the kind of rugged vibe of it, the sort of, the grittiness of it. But there were others who found the space, lacking because of those things. And so it led to a conversation of exactly what you're talking about. How do we have these studio spaces? How do we maintain them, right? When artists aren't being paid for their work, how do they pay for the spaces that they are inhabiting, right? And so it led to a really great discussion.
Yeah, with my students, Miguel gave us a tour of the building, and it was really fun, and at some point even dangerous because there's so many renovations happening in the building. But I'm really glad that the student had the opportunity to get to know the building in detail and know the complexity of keeping a building like that and making it thrive, under the current circumstances. But Miguel is doing that. The people at the Clemente are doing that, and that third space, that community is being formed and preserved by Miguel and by his collaborators. And I'm really happy that the within the current wave of displacement at Loisaida, I'm really happy that the space is still there and is still maintained, with such care.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope it continues to be that way. So if you take a look at what LATEA has to offer. And if you're in the city, go check out one of their events. I know, we've enjoyed a few really great events there, not just through Baruch, but, more community-based events as well.
Yeah, it also has become a community space for us at BLS, right? So we're very grateful for that, for that connection that it's been built, within our department and within Baruch. So, amigues, thanks for joining us for this episode. If you have anything to add, you can contact us on social media or email. Follow the podcast on Instagram and Blue Sky at Latinx Visions. Our email address is latinxvisions@gmail.com. We would love to include your thoughts in a future episode.
Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Share us with your friends and family. Subscribe and leave a 5-star review to help others find the show. And stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue the conversation around Latinx cultural politics with Edel Rodriguez, author of the graphic memoir Worm.
I'm going to be out of the city and will miss that conversation. Still, Rebecca will be joined for that episode by our wonderful colleague, Jennifer Carocho Maldonado, a scholar of graphic narratives.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. Estamos a la escucha.
Dale. Until next time.